So at number 3, I have Demon Days. And yeah, this may shock a lot of people. I still think Demon Days is a great fucking album, but the reasoning for the placement here is just because I feel like the other 2 albums in their discography are very underrated. And I feel like Demon Days isn't as pinpoint perfect as a lot of people make it seem to be. The Last Living Souls is just a great opener, just typical shit that Damon speaks about, like humans sort of ruining everything that they tap into. And their album really deals with a lot of political themes. A lot of people think that it's just straight up about 9/11, which would make sense with the timing of the album. And it's a very serious record. It is a very dark and sad record, but it's a very reflective record on the overall state of humans at the time and just moving on to the new 21st century, how we are as humans, and just kind of taking a look back at our own behavior. The simple guitar riff and Kiss with Guns just works so fucking well. I just love that the guitar riff just slowly builds up throughout the track into the very futuristic synths that Damon typically uses that are all over this record. And I just love the simplicity of this track. I feel like Damon can lay out some very simple lyrics and just focus a lot on the production, but the lyrics can really be taken in very multiple ways. So while it may seem very simple on the hindsight, once you dig deep into this lyrics, there's a lot of layers into what he's really talking about. The album just seemed very polished. It kind of seemed like the polished version of the Gorillaz self-titled. I feel like a lot of the experimentation that was in their first album just felt like it went through some sort of remastering and remixing. And while I think there's a lot of experimenting going on here, I definitely don't think it's the most experimental Gorillaz album, Demon Days, but I do think that production wise it probably is the most well put together. But I feel like vocally and just sonically it doesn't really seem to be the best that the Gorillaz can come up with. And I think this shows off the best in the last 2 tracks, which even though they are uplifting and they are very much needed in the track listing, since we've just been hearing Damon just go off on all the terrible things that humans are capable of and a lot of political themes, it kind of serves as this uplifting, like, hey, maybe there's a chance that we can move forward in a more positive light. I just felt like the tracks seemed a little bit lifeless and they just weren't as well put together. I feel like if you kept Damon on his sad, dark shit, sonically this album could have ended better, even though it conceptually probably ended in a perfect way. And this may be controversial, and I totally understand why people love this track, but I still can't get together with Dare. I feel like a lot of the vocals here were a little bit off, and maybe it's just something that I just need to constantly go back to because I feel like so many Gorillaz tracks take a decent amount of time and a decent amount of listens to fully love, but at this point, I really can't fully fuck with a lot of the vocals in Dare, even though I still understand why people love that track. But besides those little bits of negatives I have, the rest of this album really is just really well put together. I love Feel Good Inc. It's iconic for so many reasons, the way those vocals come in, and then it just builds up, and then these slow acoustics come in. But even with the slow tempo, the track doesn't really fall down or strip back when it comes to energy. It just keeps moving forward, and this whole idea of just looking at the world from above and seeing it fall apart, and just this kind of hopelessness that Damon brings in, the fact that you're one person and maybe you by yourself think you can't really make a big difference in the world and move in a more positive direction, it just fucking strikes you, man. The track November Has Come just contains such a killer fucking MF Doom feature. And I feel like when it comes to Doom, there's so much that I love about him when it comes to his lyrics, but for people that really can't get with the overall complexity of him, just listen to the way this man is fucking flowing. The rhyme schemes are so fucking insane that just from the sound of his flow alone, I feel like you can understand why some of his verses are so fucking genius, like this one right here. Every Planet We Reach Is Dead has my favorite instrumental, and I just love the falsetto that Damon uses here, that he used a lot in the self-titled album, and I feel like he didn't use enough throughout the rest of his career. I feel like that's something he could have experimented with so much, and I feel like my favorite singers don't have the vocal range of a Whitney Houston. They're not certified as the best singers, sort of like a Lou Reed. The reason why I love them, like a Lou Reed, like a Damon, is because they mess with their voice so much, and they make it sound different in so many ways, and that's why I feel like I fucked with the most. Even D'Angelo, who's so talented, he changed the way his voice sounded a lot, especially in his most recent record, and that's something that I love about singers, and that's something that I wish Damon would have experimented more in this album and just moving forward. And you can sort of see the Lou Reed influence because White Light is just paying major homage to White Light by the Velvet Underground, which if you haven't heard, please fucking do. This track sounds a lot like the White Light, White Heat track there, but it also does seem like a modern version of it, and I don't really feel like one when I listen to this track, I'm reminded too much of the Velvet Underground, where I feel like I need to go back and listen to that instead of this. I definitely think it's its own unique track. I think All Alone, while it seemed a little bit repetitive, does have one of the best bass drops here, and while the vocal performance isn't my favorite, I thought it was very well produced. I feel like every track here, even if I'm not fully in love with it, the production is just so well, so I can always put it on and just kind of dive really deep into the production. But I feel like it's some of the vocal performances and maybe the sonic visions and aspects of this that put it at number 3 and not necessarily at a number 1 for me like a lot of people would. So at number 3, I have Plastic Beach, which to me is easily their most conceptual album. Damon is speaking on the state of the world. He's bringing a lot of things about pollution, human nature, and of course the isolated loneliness that we all have grown in love when it comes to Gorillaz tracks. And he also expands on his production. There's a lot of variations from spacey futuristic beats and staticky synths, filled instrumentals that I think really expanded his palette when it came to the production side of this album. Now it's weird because I feel like having such a strong opening track is so important when it comes to an album, and I didn't fully get that here. The opening track, I feel like Snoop Dogg didn't really fulfill his feature that well. I love the bass line here and I love the production, but Snoop Dogg just didn't really open up this album well for me. I feel like so much of this album is the concept, and I don't think what Snoop Dogg was really talking about opened it up in a very great manner, and it was just kind of an awkward moment in the album. White Flag to me was a much more interesting track in terms of an opener. I love the very weird drum pattern in the beginning and the orchestration that quickly changes to a more futuristic sound, and the way Kano and Bashir are just going back and forth and the chemistry between the two just works so fucking well, and I felt like this should have been the opener of the album. Rhinestone Eyes is easily one of my standout tracks. I love the line, "The storm brings strange loyalties," which with like a band like Gorillaz, I'm sure can be taken multiple ways, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a political aspect tied into this, just based on the fact that I feel like a lot of the themes based on why the world has become so polluted and so fucked up is because of a lot of the political actions that our world leaders have taken. I also love On Melancholy Hill. I mean, like, how can you not love this track? I feel like when a track just simply based on the music by itself kind of shows you what the track is about and how sad it is, I feel like that's such an accomplishment and something that Damon does so fucking well. And then you listen to the lyrics and it just dives deeper. I feel like with a track like To Binge, you listen to the beat and it doesn't really seem that overall depressing, and it just kind of seemed like a more upbeat track, but then you dive into the lyrics and you start to read about his overall alcohol addiction and it does turn out to be a sad track. And I think there's an edge to a type of track like that, but on Melancholy Hill I feel like the production matches the subject matter so fucking well that you don't even need the lyrics to understand how sad and lonely of a track this is. Empire Ants is easily a top 5 Gorillaz track. I love the direction that Damon took in this song, the whole idea of a whole colony of ants being tied into civilization, the fact that everybody has to do its duty and slowly move along in order for society to progress, and that can kind of be tied into the way the song is produced. The fact that you have these very subtle chords in the beginning of the track, and then slowly and very slowly the track builds up until around the 2.5 minute mark you have this climax of synths that just make the track sound so much better. I feel like when you go back and listen to the track again, you can appreciate the more strict back chords in the beginning of the song, and then that climax just grabs you every single fucking time. The low points in this album are very minimal. Again, an all instrumental track like Glitter Freeze just doesn't really grab me, and it's just sort of a skippable at this point. I just feel like the whole Gorillaz presence was just kind of missing in that track, and while there are some interesting synths, I just don't feel like they grab me at all that much. But there really isn't that much of a downfall in this album. I feel like it picks right back up. I feel like the track Some Kind of Nature with Lou Reed is just so fucking catchy. They just need to keep it so simple to make a track so fucking good. And I feel like this album ends super fucking well. I feel like Damon just, one of his most savage performances. I feel like he's just speaking on the fact that we've reached a point in humanity where it's too late. Nothing we can do is ever gonna fix this. We're all gonna have to pay for it no matter what contributions we make forward. And it just kind of makes you feel hopeless when you finish listening to this album, and that's just something that I feel like Gorillaz can provide so fucking well every time they approach this dark, very just not trying to be optimistic in any way, shape, or form. And I feel like this kind of closing to me is more superior than a closing like Demon Days, where it's a little bit more uplifting, because I feel like Damon has conquered this type of sound more than the whole uplifting, more positive side of music. I feel like even though, you know, like Shown in the Now, Damon can can't do that and do it well, I feel like this whole dark and hopelessness aspect to his music turns out to make some of his best songs, like in Plastic Beach. So yes, at number 1, I have the self-titled album. I think this is when Damon peaked both in experimentation and just overall ideas. I feel like a lot of the things that might have become more polished in later Gorillaz albums started here, but it was more raw, more experimental, more ambitious. I feel like while this may not be the most overly well-produced album, just everything about the vocals and the production in itself just sounds so good, and I feel like it's something that only Damon could have done. I love Rehash, the opener. It's just catchy 101. I feel like such a groovy ass bass line, such a catchy ass hook. You can literally just listen to this on loop all fucking day. It's just super fucking catchy. And throughout this album, there's so many falsetto moments with Damon's vocals that I think make it so much superior than the experimentation in other albums. Like in Gravity, that track is just, how the fuck do you even make a song like that? The bass drops here are just so fucking insane. And his vocals again might put off some people, but I love this falsetto so much. And it's most present in this album, which is why I think I love it so much and it's at my number 1 spot. 19 to 2000 is easily one of my standout tracks. I really got a Nirvana vibe when it came to the subject matter, because Damon is basically telling his fans, like, stop dancing to my music because it's very depressive. I feel like you're not paying attention to the lyrics. And that's something that Kurt Cobain addressed in Bloom, where he's basically telling the fans, like, you only like this because it's a catchy melody and you could kind of sing to it, but you have no idea what it really means. And with Nirvana being one of my favorite bands, I just thought that was dope as fuck. Something that I feel like hurts an album when it comes to aging, I feel like it's the hit record. I feel like sometimes the hit records become so overplayed that the replay value kind of goes down, but that's not the case here. Clint Eastwood still sounds as good as the day this shit came out. Again, the falsetto is very present in the hook here, and the Funky Homo Sapien just delivers dope ass verse. The track Slow Country, that instrumental is just so spaced out and so atmospheric, and the way those little piano chords come in just quickly, a little bit more upbeat tempo, just mesh so fucking well. And again, this could have straight up just been an instrumental, and then the very falsetto vocals just kind of add to all this. And I feel like it's the quirkiness that Damon brings and the personality that he brings that makes this album so great. Because even in tracks that I don't fully love, like Man Research Clapper, and I totally get why people hate that shit, I still get some form of enjoyment out of that track just because of how quirky and weird is Damon with his overall vocal performance and just his charisma. It's just the energy that Damon brings into all of these songs that make each of them very unique and very enjoyable in their own sense. Like even the Latin Simone Spanish track, even though the vocals put me off, there is an English version with Damon singing that just kind of portrays the complete opposite of the subject matter here. And here the guy's trying to sort of uplift Damon and trying to ask him, why are you so depressed and sad all the time? And he's just trying to kind of be uplifting. And then the English version, Damon is just speaking on how depressed and how low he is. So I feel like there's so much uniqueness to each track that even the ones that aren't my favorites, I still get so much enjoyment out of them. I love New Genius, brother. I mean, just the very high-pitched vocals. Man, I just fucking love that shit so much. I wish Damon would come back to that shit. It's just so fucking genius. This was actually sampled by Flatbush Zombies, and I feel like this is why hip-hop artists work so well when it comes to features in Gorillaz, because so much of their shit can be sampled and can be sped up and added a drum pattern to fit so many hip-hop elements. And I feel like he does it with all types of genres. He adds his own flavor and his own uniqueness to each track, and it just feels like it can be expanded on so much. That's what gives him so much freedom to be quirky and so weird and expand on his own shit. And the last track, M1A1, which I see a lot of people shit on, but even though the very weird 2 minutes that start off and the guy's just yelling hello, I feel like that gave me so much emotion when I first heard it. And around the 2 to 3 minute mark, you get some of the hardest guitar chords that Damon used throughout his entire career, very hard, and the way he just seems insane with his vocal performance, and with so much of the album talking about drugs and recreational use of these substances and all the different hallucinations that they give you and the feelings that they give you. I feel like this is when he reached his most peak level of insanity, and his mental stability just isn't controlled at all, and it shows so well with the vocal performance here. So yeah, when you tie in the experimentation in this album, the fact that I love the falsetto so much, the very raw and experimental experimental sounds when it comes to the production, this is, in my opinion, the best Gorillaz album. And while I think Plastic Beach and Demon Days aren't that far back, I just feel like there's elements here that I didn't get in those albums as much. And there's things that I wish Damon would have expanded from this album moving forward, but I feel like he just ventured into different places, which why I still loved, I probably didn't love as much as the shit that I got here. But y'all let me know what's your order of Gorillaz albums. I'm sure we're gonna be disagreeing on a lot of shit. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be with y'all very soon.